Now, presidential government. That's a government like ours. The executive branch is separated from the legislative and judicial branches. The French system is often called a dual presidential system. Your book doesn't talk about that, I don't believe. No, it doesn't. But so it's a little different from a typical presidential system. Kind of funny that they choose to go into this particular type of presidential system. And the French system, the president has more official powers than our president does. So the French president, and the current French president right now, Nicolas Sarkozy, is pictured here. They have 7-year terms. They are directly elected by French people. They negotiate treaties just like our president. They appoint high officials just like our president. They act as chair of the high councils of the armed forces, sort of like our. I mean, these aren't exactly the same way the U.S. president does it, but they have similar powers here. They can appeal directly to the people with a referendum. Our president cannot do that. And they act as dictator in a national emergency. Our president has certain executive orders, powers in time of emergency, but it's not quite the same thing, and our president can't quite pull the trigger quite as quickly to become basically dictator of the country in time of emergency. And there are more safeguards in the U.S. So the premier in the French system, the president contacts the legislature through a premier who's appointed by the president. The premier appoints ministers in the cabinet. They conduct day-to-day affairs of government. Officially, the premier and his cabinet answer to the lower house of the French Parliament, the National Assembly. But in reality, the premier answers to the president. This goes back to Charles de Gaulle when France moved from something called the Fourth Republic to the French Republic. They wanted a more stable, powerful government, and this is what they did. So the president can even, in the French system, dissolve the National Assembly and call for new elections. Very powerful. Alright, so emerging democracies. With the collapse of communism and changing global politics, more emerging democracies are in existence. Examples in the book are Poland, South Africa, and Mexico. So let's get right at it. Poland. Solidarity led the way in a revolution against communism in Eastern Europe. Solidarity was a trade union. The guy at the top of the slide is Lech Walesa, and he was the leader of the trade union. This is an older Lech Walesa. I remember seeing him in the news when I was a kid with dark hair. And Solidarity would sweep democratic elections after the collapse of communism. Solidarity's leader, Lech Walesa, then was elected first president. The guy below Lech Walesa on this slide, Komorowski, is the president of Poland right now. So Poland in 1992 established a temporary constitution. It took 5 years, a lot of wrangling to get the National Assembly to adopt a permanent constitution. Poland joined the European Union in 2004, even though they had a weak economy and communism is more active in the country. There are communist political leaders who, I guess, haven't given up yet. And Poland, I looked at it on the internet, seems like it still has some economic issues, and it's really in the middle of this whole banking problem, solvency problem for various countries in the European Union today. South Africa, in 1948, South Africa created legalized segregation called apartheid, which put people into groups and, of course, segregated them. So in South Africa, you have these groups called blacks. After all, you can't call them African Americans. They're not American. Whites and coloreds, which are people of mixed race, and Asians. There are a lot of people from India, for example, who moved into South Africa when Britain was in control of South Africa. And the blacks suffered the most under this system. In the last half of the 20th century, black nationalist groups, including the African National Congress, pushed for reform. And in the 1960s, ANC African National Congress leader Nelson Mandela formed a military force. He was jailed for life for treason. In the 1980s, the U.S. and the European Economic Community, which today is called the European Union, ordered economic sanctions The guy that you see a picture of here is F.W. de Klerk. He is going to be the leader of South Africa who will push for an end to apartheid. The white leader, anyway. After all, Nelson Mandela is still around. Sanctions restricted trade and withheld aid against the racist South African government. So you get a sense of what sanctions are about. Imposing restrictions and withholding aid. And in the late 1980s, apartheid was ending. In 1990, Nelson Mandela would be freed. In the first non-racial election in South Africa, the ANC would win a majority, and Mandela would be chosen president. Today, they still face some challenges, ensuring equal rights, economic growth, and raising of the standard of living. And here, Jacob Zuma, he is the president of South Africa right now. Mexico. 1917, the Mexican Constitution established a presidential system, kind of like ours. The PRI, the Institutional Revolutionary Party, remember in Spanish, they place adjectives in different order with nouns. So the Parte Revolucionaria Institucional becomes Institutional Revolutionary Party in English. That's why it's PRI instead of IRP. It controlled the presidency and the government for 60 plus years. That's not a sign of a healthy democracy. The PRI was able to use its political patronage, which means power of political leaders to get people jobs and things like that. Use government resources. I'm sure that they use government resources, for example, to run their campaigns to help them get reelected, and media support to stay in power. After all, if you're in the media in Mexico during this time period, being nice to the government means the government will be nice to you. So in 1994, Ernesto Zedillo Ponce de Leon will win the presidency, and he's part of the PRI, but he will introduce reforms to create fair competition. By 2000, Vicente Fox of PAN, the National Assembly Party, will become president under these new, more fair election policies. And Vicente Fox, by the way, used to be a high-ranking corporate executive in Coca-Cola. Now, PAN did not win a majority under Vicente Fox, and he had to form a coalition. Over here we see Felipe Calderon, a member of PAN who happens to be the president today. And what Mexico's facing right now is, of course, we've encouraged them to fight a war on the drug cartels, and that has led to an awful lot of violence down in Mexico.